My parents never even bothered to call me by my real name. To them, I was simply the stupid one. That was the label they branded onto me before I could even read. Meanwhile, my sister, Isabella, was treated like she was born with a crown on her head. She was the genius, the shining jewel of the Moreau family, the one who landed a full scholarship to Yale, like destiny itself had cleared the path for her. On her graduation day, my father stood before hundreds of guests with his chest puffed like a king at court, boasting about the empire Isabella would inherit. He promised her our family's $80 million company, a brand new Mercedes, and the $12 million penthouse overlooking Central Park. The applause was deafening, as if the crowd was blessing her coronation. And me? I sat in the back, invisible, my stomach twisting with humiliation, wondering if I would ever escape the shadow they forced me into. And then it happened. A man I had never seen before appeared at my side. He bent down, pressed a thick white envelope into my hands, and whispered words that set my heart racing. "It's time to show them who you really are." In that single moment, everything I thought I knew about myself, and everything my family believed about me, began to crumble. See, I grew up in a house where love was handed out like trophies, and only Isabella ever won them. From the earliest days, my father, Charles Moreau, made it crystal clear who mattered and who didn't. Isabella was the prodigy, the golden daughter destined to carry the family name forward. I was the other one, the disappointment, the child who could never quite fit the mold of perfection they demanded. At family dinners, I always sat at the far end of the mahogany table, so distant it felt like another country. My father sat at the head, Isabella by his right hand, and my mother, Camille, leaning close to beam with pride at every word Isabella spoke. By the time I opened my mouth, the conversation had already moved on, as if my voice didn't exist at all. I learned that silence was safer than watching their eyes roll. My father had a way of cutting me down with a single phrase. I remember one evening when I was 14. Isabella had just announced she'd been accepted into an advanced science program. The table erupted in cheers. My father raised his glass and said proudly, "That is what it means to be a Moreau. Excellence, leadership, brilliance." Then he turned to me with the faintest smirk. "And you, Celeste, you managed to pass gym class. Small victories, I suppose?" The room burst into laughter. Even my mother, though her laugh was softer, almost guilty, still joined in, as if cruelty had become tradition. It hurt more than I can explain, not because of the words themselves, but because they never once imagined I could be anything more. My mother often whispered comparisons when she thought no one else was listening. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" she would say, while handing me a plate or passing me a stack of laundry. Her tone was casual, almost gentle, but every remark sank into me like a stone sinking to the bottom of a well. Isabella thrived in this environment. She wore the role of perfection like a custom-tailored dress. Tall, striking, confident, she carried herself as though she already owned the world, and she enjoyed reminding me of it. When I was 16, I worked a part-time job at a local diner, scraping together savings for my own things. One night, as I grabbed my jacket to head out, Isabella smirked from the velvet couch where she sat surrounded by our parents' praise. "Don't forget to scrub the grease off your hands before you touch the door," she said sweetly. "We wouldn't want the neighbors thinking the Moreau family keeps a servant." My parents laughed as if she'd delivered the joke of the night. I forced myself to smile, walked out the door, and pretended it didn't matter. But every comment like that chipped a little more away from me. The only person who ever saw me differently was my grandfather, Henri Moreau. My grandfather had built everything. The Moreau Empire wasn't born from privilege. He carved it out of nothing with his bare hands and stubborn faith. Henri Moreau was quieter than my father, gentler too. He believed in people over profits, in character over trophies. Whenever I visited him, he never asked about grades or awards the way my parents did. Instead, he asked about my thoughts, my dreams, and the things that actually made me happy. One summer afternoon, we sat together on his porch as the light faded, and he leaned close with words that would follow me for years. Celeste, never. Mistake their blindness for truth. You carry something Isabella does not. One day, when the moment comes, you'll see it. Don't let them convince you otherwise. At the time, I couldn't grasp what he meant. To me, I was just the forgotten daughter, surviving in the shadows of a family that measured love by headlines and accolades. Life in our house felt like a competition I was never allowed to win. My father groomed Isabella like a soldier destined for greatness. He dragged her into board meetings while she was still a teenager, let her shadow business deals, and introduced her to every guest as the future of the Moreau legacy. I was never invited. My role was to mow the lawn, run errands, and stay out of sight, as if my existence was an inconvenience, something to manage, not celebrate. The older we grew, the wider the gap stretched between us. When Isabella's acceptance letter from Yale arrived, it was treated like a national holiday. My mother threw a party that very night. Champagne, catering, the works. Strangers clapped me on the shoulder, assuming I must be proud. But behind my polite smile, I felt invisible, as if my only identity was being Isabella's sister. By the time I was 19, I had learned the truth. I couldn't rely on my parents for love or validation. So I built my own scraps of independence. I worked 2, sometimes 3, part-time jobs, stacking boxes in warehouses and scrubbing dishes until my hands cracked. While Isabella returned from summers abroad with glossy stories of Europe, I came home with calluses and a savings account no one ever asked about. My parents dismissed my work as wasted time, never realizing it was making me stronger than they could imagine. Still, the weight of their judgment pressed down every time we gathered as a family. My father's voice echoed in my head. Celeste, you'll never amount to anything. My mother's sighs trailed behind me like shadows. Isabella's laughter, effortless, confident, was a constant reminder of how wide the gulf between us had grown. So when her graduation drew near, I braced myself for what I knew was coming. It was never a question of if they would humiliate me, but how public and painful they would make it this time. I prepared to sit in silence, swallowing my pride as they crowned Isabella the jewel of the Moreau family yet again. What I didn't know was that the life they forced me to accept, the shadows, the shame, the invisibility, was about to collide with a truth so powerful it would shake the entire family. That envelope, the one handed to me in secret, would prove my grandfather's words right. My silence would not last forever. The day of Isabella's graduation felt less like a ceremony and more like a royal performance. My mother, Camille, rushed through the house barking orders to the staff about flowers and catering. My father, Charles, stood in the foyer adjusting his cufflinks, already rehearsing the speech he planned to give in front of hundreds of guests. I had no role except to stay quiet. My dress was a hand-me-down from Isabella's closet, altered to fit me only slightly, and my seat had been placed all the way in the back row. From that distance, I watched Isabella glide across the stage, her name announced to thunderous applause. My parents rose to their feet, clapping with pride, their smiles so wide they could have split their faces. I clapped too, though my hands felt heavy, my stomach twisted into knots. But the real spectacle came after. Our family hosted a grand reception in a Manhattan ballroom glittering with chandeliers, the polished floors gleaming gold beneath the light. Luxury cars pulled up outside while politicians, business elites, and family friends swept through the doors in tuxedos and gowns. They weren't just there to celebrate her degree, they were there to witness the announcement, the inheritance, the crowning moment. I tried to stay invisible, pressed against the back wall, half hidden behind towering vases of lilies. My presence was an afterthought, a courtesy at best. Some guests barely nodded as they brushed past. Others whispered, "That must be the other daughter," as though I were nothing more than a footnote in Isabella's story. And then the moment I had been dreading began. My father climbed the stage, microphone in hand, his voice booming across the glittering ballroom. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight to honor my brilliant daughter, Isabella Moreau. The crowd erupted in thunderous applause. Isabella stood near the front, her gown shimmering under the chandeliers, grinning with the effortless confidence she'd been fed her entire life. Charles Moreau, my father, continued, each word swelling with grandeur. As many of you know, the Moreau family has built more than just a company. We have built a legacy. And tonight, I am proud to announce that Isabella will not only carry our name forward, but will inherit the very foundation of what we created. He stretched out his hand as if presenting a crown. The company, valued at $80 million, the Mercedes parked outside, and the Manhattan penthouse worth $12 million. She is the future of our family, and I could not be prouder. The applause was deafening. Glasses clinked, cheers filled the air until the sound pressed against my chest like a weight. I stayed in my chair at the back, sinking lower with every cheer. My mother leaned into my father's side, her face glowing with satisfaction, her hand resting on his arm as if to say, "We did it. Our perfect daughter has it all." For a fleeting moment, Isabella's eyes found mine. She raised her champagne glass, not in inclusion, but mockery. Her smirk was sharp, cutting, as if toasting my failure. The message in her eyes was clear. I won, you lost. I wanted to disappear, to melt into the shadows where I'd been kept my whole life. Humiliation weighed heavier than ever. I thought of the years I had worked quietly, unnoticed. The nights I stayed awake, whispering to myself that maybe, just maybe, they would see me differently one day. But with those words from my father, that fragile dream was destroyed in front of everyone. As the cheers carried on, my mother glided past me on her way to the stage. She didn't pause, not really, just long enough to lean down and slice me open with a whisper. At least don't ruin this day for your sister. Keep to yourself. Then she was gone again, smiling wide as she reached for Isabella's hand, basking in borrowed light. The speeches continued. The toasts grew louder. I sat frozen in my chair, fists clenched beneath the table, a storm of rage and sorrow raging inside me. But I couldn't show it. Not here, not in front of them. I thought of my grandfather Henri, the only person who had ever spoken to me as though I mattered. His words rang in my head. One day, the truth will set you free. But what truth? All I saw was this reality. My parents had chosen their favorite, and Isabella had been crowned queen. I was nothing but the forgotten daughter, erased in front of a cheering crowd. The applause was like nails sealing my coffin. For a moment, I believed I would always remain silent, enduring as I always had, every insult, every cruel laugh, every whisper in the hallways. And then, something shifted. When the music started again and the clinking of glasses softened, I noticed a man in a dark suit moving toward me through the crowd. He wasn't clapping, he wasn't smiling. He carried something in his hand, and his eyes were locked on me alone. He cut through the laughter and chatter as though none of it existed, his gaze steady, unflinching. The air seemed to change as he drew closer. He stopped at my table, tall and sharp-featured, his expression unreadable. And without a word, he placed a thick envelope in front of me. I pressed it against my lap, shielding it from view, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. For a second, I considered slipping out before anyone noticed, but his words, low, calm, deliberate, echoed in my mind. It's time to show them who you really are. What could that possibly mean? On stage, Isabella and my father continued to smile, laughing with guests, clinking glasses, soaking in the adoration. But my world had already shifted. I opened the envelope with trembling hands, and then I froze. My breath caught when I saw my name, written clearly, not as a joke, not as an afterthought, but in legal recognition. Inside were documents naming me, Celeste Moreau, as heir. The shares of the Moreau Company, the trust controlling the Manhattan Penthouse, accounts I'd never even heard of. All of it was under my name. The final page stopped me cold. It was a transfer of authority, signed years earlier in my grandfather Henri's unmistakable handwriting. My hands trembled as I unfolded the letter, the ink blurring through my tears. Henri hadn't chosen Isabella. He hadn't chosen my father, Charles, or the polished image of perfection my family worshipped. He had chosen me. For years, I had believed their cruelty defined me, that their constant reminders of my worthlessness were the truth. But this was proof that the man who built it all had seen me differently. My chest tightened with disbelief, with defiance. I wanted to stand up right then, to shout the truth, but fear kept me still. At the front of the room, my father basked in adoration, his reputation gleaming brighter with every cheer. And there I was, clutching the papers that revealed a secret bigger than anything he had ever imagined. This wasn't just an envelope, it was freedom. I closed the folder and pressed it against my chest, the decision crystallizing inside me. I would not stay silent. Not this time. I would not let his voice erase mine any longer. The music softened as another toast began, glasses raised in Isabella's honor, cheers echoing once again through the golden-lit hall, and in my mind, Henri's words rang out. One day, the truth will set you free. This was that day. My pulse hammered as I climbed the steps to the stage, my hands clenched at my sides. My father leaned into the microphone, forcing a smile as he hissed under his breath, "Celeste, this is not your moment." But I stood my ground. My voice trembled at first, then grew stronger with each word. "Actually, Father, this moment belongs to me." The room froze. Guests stopped mid-toast, mid-laugh, their eyes snapping toward me. For years, I had obeyed commands like that without hesitation. For years, I had shrunk into the shadows when told I didn't belong. But not this time. With shaking hands, I pulled the documents from my jacket and raised them high for all to see. "I'm not the one embarrassing myself," I said, my voice carrying farther than I thought possible. "You are." Gasps rippled across the ballroom. Isabella laughed nervously, raising her glass again, trying to brush me off. "What are you doing? Sit down before you make a fool of yourself." Guests traded uneasy glances, unsure what to believe. My father lunged toward me, his face red with fury. "This is ridiculous. That old man must have been confused when he signed those papers." But before he could rip them from my hands, a steady, commanding voice cut through the chaos. I knew exactly what I was doing. All heads turned as my grandfather Henri rose slowly from his chair. His cane tapped against the polished floor as he moved toward the stage, but his presence filled the room with more power than my father's booming voice ever had. He looked out over the crowd, then back at me. "She is the rightful heir. Not because she is the strongest or the loudest, but because she has not hardened her heart. She will lead with compassion, not vanity." The room erupted again, this time in gasps, in murmurs, in shock. Isabella's face drained of color, the smug smile vanishing. "Grandfather, you can't be serious," she stammered. "I've done everything to make you proud. I've achieved more than she ever could." Henri's eyes softened, but his words were sharp. "You achieved only for yourself, Isabella, not for others. That is not leadership." I turned to the audience, my hands steady now. All my life, I was told I was nothing, that I would never measure up. Tonight, you heard my father declare it again, but you can see the truth in my hands. My grandfather believed in me when no one else did. I will not waste what he entrusted me with. I will honor this family's legacy, not with arrogance, but with integrity. Guests began clapping. hesitant at first, then stronger, a tide of approval washing over me. And in that moment, clarity struck. This was never just about wealth or inheritance. It was about breaking free from the chains they'd locked me in since childhood. The humiliation, the cruelty, the silence, all of it had led here, to this night, to this truth. I looked at Henri and bowed my head slightly. Thank you for believing in me. His hand pressed against mine, steady and warm. For the first time in my life, I realized I had never been the stupid one. I had only been waiting for the right moment to show them who I truly was. The applause swelled, filling the room like a storm breaking free. My father's face twisted with bitterness, his voice low and venomous. This isn't the end. You have no idea what you're getting into, Celeste. He turned sharply, storming out of the ballroom, his polished shoes cracking against the floor like gunfire. My mother trailed after him, her eyes avoiding mine. Isabella tried to meet my gaze, her lips pressed tight, but for once it was she who shrank. I stood taller. Maybe I'm not what you wanted me to be, I said softly, but I am what my grandfather believes I can be. And that's more than enough. For the first time, I saw it clearly in my father's eyes before he left. Fear. Fear that the foundation of his superiority had finally crumbled. The applause rose again, but this time it wasn't for Isabella or for my father. It was for me. The sound swept through the ballroom like a tide washing away years of silence. My chest lifted as I stood taller, no longer the shadow they had kept hidden in the corner. For the first time in my life, I wasn't invisible. I was undeniable. Later that night, when the chandeliers dimmed and the crowd thinned, I slipped outside into the cool Manhattan air. The city lights shimmered across the skyline, and I clutched the folder against my chest like a lantern, proof that I was finally free from the cage they had built around me. The lesson was as sharp as it was liberating. Being underestimated does not define your worth. Sometimes the cruelest judgments carve out a strength no one sees coming. The labels others pin on you don't decide your future. What matters is the truth you carry inside and the courage to stand when the moment finally arrives. My grandfather Henri joined me on the terrace, resting a steady hand on my shoulder. His voice was soft but certain. You see now, don't you? And I did. So, if you've ever been called less, if you've ever been mocked, dismissed, or pushed aside, remember this moment. Your worth is not defined by the voices that try to bury you. Your time will come, and when it does, the truth will speak louder than any insult ever could. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched you, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below and tell me what part resonated most with you, and if you want more stories like this, subscribe to the channel. Because in the end, this was never just about an inheritance or a company. It was about breaking the chains of silence, about refusing to be erased by the people who should have loved me most. My family's cruelty tried to define me, but my grandfather's faith reminded me of the truth. I was never weak, never worthless, only waiting for the right moment to rise. And when that moment came, I claimed it. Not to humiliate them, not to prove them wrong, but to prove myself right. So remember this: no crown, no mansion, no fortune has the power to define you. What defines you is the courage to stand when the world tells you to sit down, the courage to choose your own voice over their silence. That night, I stopped being the forgotten daughter. I became the woman who would never let them write my story again.